Today's focus is, will production start in Germany and Austin prior to the end of the quarter, which would be the last day of September. And then the second piece we cover today is that Teslafaninsight is reporting 1,800 vehicles a day being produced in China. That's 1,000 Model Ys and 800 Model 3s. And if you add that to the 1,600 vehicles a day being produced in Fremont, we're now at about 3,400 vehicles a day being produced in the two facilities. So our goal today is to review all these numbers in anticipation of a forecast for what we're going to see for the production numbers for the quarter. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show and would like some interesting insights that'll help you in investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. And then we also wanted to encourage you to like and subscribe if you enjoy the show. So we were doing some digging and research over the last couple of days. It was announced by actually about 3 weeks ago from Teslafaninsight that they actually had numbers of 1,800 vehicles a day coming out of the China facility. And I think it makes more sense for us to sort of change direction and sort of review the fact before getting into those numbers that there is a problem right now, which is that they're not going to produce anything. They're going to stockpile in both Germany and in Austin heading into October and then begin production then. The question is, why is that? The answer is that it turns out that the numbers are so good, there's no need to juice it with the additional production from those facilities to show impressive numbers when it comes to earnings for the quarter, earnings and production for the quarter. So the next question then is, what are those numbers? Which we first start with the fact that both places are going 24/7 currently. And as I shared, the numbers from Shanghai are about 1,800 vehicles a day. We're getting 1,600 vehicles a day from Fremont. If you add the two up, you get about 3,400 vehicles being produced on a daily basis. Now, if we multiply this, let's say by 30, we end up with 102,000 vehicles a month being produced. And then if we multiply that by 3, we come up with 306,000 vehicles approximately that are being produced for this quarter. Now, the question is that good? Is that bad? How's it line up? It turns out that for this quarter, Morgan Stanley was expecting, and they have an $810 price target on the stock, and they were expecting for this month Tesla to do about 212,000 vehicles, and in the fourth quarter, about 260,000 vehicles. So this is why things are going to get really interesting for Tesla over the next, let's say, 60 days as we head into both the production numbers and then we actually get the earnings numbers towards the end of the month. And that is that there's one other number that I wanted to throw at you, which is if you're producing, call it 306,000 vehicles approximately for the quarter, and we multiply that by 4, that's 1.2 million vehicles a year as a run rate for the whole company. So again, interesting number, because for this calendar year, the forecast was for approximately 850,000 vehicles, but it's quite clear that 1 million vehicles is going to come in. So the question that's sort of hanging out there is, well, how many vehicles are going to start coming out of Austin and then Germany? And then when you add that to the production that's pre-existing where we're at in terms of production for the year. Now, it's our belief that the break even for both factories is about is someplace around 1,000 vehicles a day. So we're actually expecting this thing to start off in that 2,000 to 3,000 vehicles a day zone. Obviously starting at 1,000 perhaps for a week or two, and then bumping up into that 2,000 to 3,000 vehicles a day zone. So again, these are obviously speculative numbers because we don't have a hard core, but it's clear that we're going to start production definitely in Austin, and likely this quarter in Germany as well, and that all those vehicles added are going to make a difference. So this is an interesting situation because all of a sudden we're already at 1 million run rate based on what's being produced in the other two factories. And if we bring both of these factories along, I think Austin is closer to start producing because they're stockpiling parts from what we've seen that's greater. We're actually looking at something like, 150,000 vehicles isn't out of line as we move into the rest of the year. If we're doing 102,000 now on a monthly basis, I think it's realistic for us to head towards 150,000 vehicles a month. So multiply that times 4, that, in theory, we're at about 500,000 vehicles being produced for the last month of the quarter. And I definitely think this gets over 1 million vehicles for the year. But in theory, we could end up, if they were able to ramp one or both facilities to half capacity, we could be talking another, breaching the numbers expected, heading for a huge year where the last quarter of the year could be a very large number, like 500,000 to 700,000 vehicles, which easily puts us over our anticipated million at the best case, heading for 1.5 million vehicles. So if this happens, what does it mean in terms of the stock price? And I think you see where we're going in terms of the answer to this. The one other number I wanted to toss out there to you is, it was a slight mistake for us, but we kind of did okay in terms of our forecast for the quarter. That number is that the run rate for Tesla was 60,000 vehicle, or $60,000 per vehicle was the revenue rate that they ran. And we have to say that if, the way to figure out a number here for what our forecast is for the quarter is to multiply 6,000 vehicles times $60,000 per vehicle. And I think we end up someplace in that 18 billion range for the revenue for the quarter. And then we're putting a 30% perhaps margin against those numbers to find out what the profit might be. So I know that our numbers aren't precise. Obviously, we haven't seen everything yet. There's a couple of, I know the numbers you threw out, but there's some other things to think about here. According to one of our sources, if you look at the number of bays, that is delivery bays for vehicles, there are 74 in Fremont, and there are over 200 in Shanghai. So this, it's like a straw. The throughput capability is affected by sort of how this all works. So I wanted to also bring this up to you because there are not a lot of numbers flying around. Tesla's going to obviously deliver their production numbers on October 1. Actually, usually they wait for 3 days. So in theory, it could happen on October 1. But the third business day after close is their trend. It could be the day before. But everything we're seeing says the number is going to be huge. And as we've reviewed numerous times, there are two variables that determine how everything kind of works out. Number one is how many vehicles were produced and profits and revenue from that. But more importantly, what's the forecast? And as you can see, the forecast is fantastic. And so we think that all this adds up to the fact that even the bears on Tesla are going to have to embrace and upgrade the stock once we get beyond the production numbers for the month. So our goal or agenda here was that I guess you can sit around and say, hey, I'm brilliant and I have a better forecast than the guys on Wall Street. But I think it's a lot easier to just get some idea what the numbers are and add them up. And that way your forecast gets a lot closer because you actually have real numbers attached to it, was the agenda today. So I would, we're definitely going to dabble back into this over time. I wanted to throw this out there because that way, as you're preparing to invest, et cetera, you can be thinking through strategy and plan on this as I just described. So I also want to remind you again, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Please take time to like and subscribe. We do have a few SpaceX shares if there's interest that we just acquired. And we also wanted to get on to our health tips. Don't forget, don't go to bed within 4 hours of eating, minimum 2 to allow the food to digest. Secondly, just wanted to encourage you to consider our 5-2 or some of the other diets relative to better mental health through your health management through fasting. Finally, we try to introduce forest bathing as a concept in our show a lot, and hopefully you can hear a little bit of the water running behind us as part of our initiative in this regard. But just getting out in nature in general, any type of exercise can be helpful in your process of better health. And we want to promote and encourage that. And at the end of the show, we'll have a few minutes of sort of ocean audio or water audio that you can relax and listen to if you're so inclined. At any rate, I just think this is going to be a great quarter for Tesla, and I think that it could see some blowout movement of numbers, etc. Just wanted to review. Tschüss, au revoir, French, Heathrow, Hebrew, Choda, Hafez, Farsi, Zdravstvuyte, Russian, Ni hao ma, Chinese, Konbanwa, Japanese, Hey do, Swedish, good day, our friends in Australia, Arrivederci, Namaste, Hindi, and in Jamaica we say enough respect, walk good man. I also wanted to leave you with a question. We have a lot of good friends on this show, and I have a classmate from high school who informed me that she reads 92 books a year. And since I'm at maybe one book a month, I am trying to catch up, and one of my goals was to find good books to add to my reading list where I could at least read a wiki page, and my goal was to get to 92 wiki pages per year, but maybe 2 or 3 a month as a change of pace. I wanted to see if you had any recommendations of anything you've read in the last 5 years that you thought was a really great book, so you could list what the book is and why you thought it was a great read. At any rate, once again, thanks for joining us, and have a great day, and bye for now.